Clara and I, 29M, met 5 years ago at a friend's birthday party. It was one of those nights I almost skipped because I was exhausted from work, but something, or someone, made me stay. Clara walked into the room wearing a bright yellow sundress, her laughter louder than the music. She had this magnetic energy that drew everyone to her, but somehow, she chose to spend most of the evening talking to me. She teased me about my inability to hold a conversation when I first saw her. I was too mesmerized to form a coherent sentence. "Cat got your tongue?" she had joked, and we both burst into laughter. From that moment, I was hooked. Clara was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. She was smart, funny, and ambitious. She worked as a graphic designer and was passionate about her work. She could spend hours talking about typography and color palettes, and even though I didn't understand half of it, I loved listening to her talk. Her enthusiasm was contagious. One of my favorite things about Clara was her kindness. She had a way of making everyone feel seen and valued. Whether it was a stranger at the grocery store or one of our friends going through a tough time, Clara was always there with a warm smile and words of encouragement. She made me want to be a better person. We started dating a few weeks after that party. Our first date was at a little coffee shop downtown. Clara was nervous and accidentally spilled her latte all over the table. She laughed it off, and so did I. That's one thing I'll always love about her ability to find humor in the most embarrassing situations. Over the years, we built a life together. We traveled, cooked meals together, and spent lazy Sundays watching our favorite shows. Every year, we'd celebrate our anniversary by recreating our first date at that same coffee shop. I was certain Clara was the one. I had even started saving up for an engagement ring. I'd already picked out the perfect one. A vintage-style ring with a sapphire center stone because Clara once mentioned how much she loved sapphires. Then came the news that changed everything. Clara sat me down one evening, her hands trembling as she held mine. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. At first, I was stunned. We hadn't been actively trying, but we weren't exactly preventing it either. After the shock wore off, I felt an overwhelming wave of joy. Clara and I were going to be parents. We spent the next few weeks in a bubble of happiness. We started brainstorming baby names. She liked traditional names like Emma and Jack, while I leaned towards something unique, like Aria or Finn. Clara started looking up nursery designs on Pinterest, and I made a spreadsheet of all the baby gear we'd need. I couldn't wait to be a dad. I pictured teaching my kid how to ride a bike, taking them to their first baseball game, and helping them with homework. Clara and I even talked about moving into a bigger apartment to make room for the baby. I was also planning something special for Clara. I wanted to propose before the baby arrived. I pictured a cozy evening at home, just the two of us. I'd cook her favorite meal, spaghetti carbonara, and light some candles. Then, as we were finishing dessert, I'd get down on one knee and ask her to spend the rest of her life with me. Everything felt perfect. I was happier than I'd ever been. But looking back, there were signs I missed. Clara's phone seemed to buzz a lot more often than usual, and she'd always make excuses to leave the room to answer it. I chalked it up to work. Her job could be demanding, and she was always juggling multiple projects. She also seemed a bit more distracted lately. She forgot our dinner plans once, something she'd never done before. When I teased her about it, she laughed and blamed it on pregnancy brain. I didn't think much of it at the time. I trusted Clara completely. She was the love of my life, the future mother of my child, and the person I planned to grow old with. Little did I know, the perfect life I was building with Clara was about to come crashing down. It started with small cracks, subtle changes in her behavior that I brushed off as stress or pregnancy hormones. But those cracks were about to widen into a chasm so deep, it would swallow everything I thought I knew about her. For now, I was a man in love, excited for the future and the family we were about to start together. It started small, barely noticeable at first. Clara began coming home later than usual, claiming she had extra deadlines at work. Her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter or coffee table, was now glued to her hand or tucked away in her bag. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off, saying she was just too tired to deal with anyone but me. I wanted to believe her, so I did. I chalked her changes in behavior up to the pregnancy. I'd read all about the hormonal shifts and mood swings that could come with it, and I told myself this was just part of the process, but something wasn't sitting right with me. One evening we were watching TV and her phone buzzed on the coffee table. The name on the screen made my stomach turn. Elliot. Elliot was Clara's coworker, a guy I had never liked. From the beginning I thought he was too friendly, too familiar with her. He was always leaving comments on her social media posts, little jokes, emojis, things that felt just a bit too personal. Clara had always brushed it off, saying, "Elliot's harmless, babe. He's just like that with everyone." I tried to let it go, but that nagging feeling wouldn't leave me. The next day, while Clara was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I looked at her phone. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her messages. Most of them were innocent, work-related exchanges. But then I saw a string of messages that made my blood run cold. Elliot. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Clara. Me too. I hate sneaking around, but it's worth it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My heart was racing and my vision blurred with tears. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Clara, the woman I loved, the woman carrying my child, was cheating on me. I waited until she came out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel and a smile on her face. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Who the hell is Elliot to you?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Her smile vanished. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Clara. I saw the messages. Tell me the truth." She froze, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. "It's not what you think," she finally said. "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Because it sure as hell looks like you've been sneaking around with him while I've been here, planning our future together." Clara sat down on the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. "It just happened," she said, her voice muffled. "I didn't mean for it to. I love you, not him." "Don't give me that crap," I snapped. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied to my face." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she tried to explain. "It was the hormones, okay? I've been all over the place emotionally, and Elliot was just there. He listened to me when I felt like you didn't." "That's your excuse?" I yelled. "You cheated because you felt ignored? I've been here for you every step of the way, Clara. I've done everything I could to make you happy, and this is how you repay me?" She sobbed harder, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I was too hurt, too angry. "Is the baby even mine?" I finally asked, the question I'd been dreading since I saw those messages. Clara looked up at me, her face pale. "Of course it's yours," she whispered. "I swear it's yours." "How can I believe anything you say?" I asked bitterly. She didn't have an answer. The rest of the evening was a blur of shouting and tears. Clara begged me to forgive her, to stay and work things out for the sake of our baby. But I couldn't even look at her. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. I packed a bag and left, needing space to think. I ended up crashing on my best friend Jake's couch, replaying the night's events over and over in my head. Jake tried to calm me down, but nothing helped. All I could think about was the life I thought I was building with Clara, the future that was now in ruins. Over the next few days, Clara kept calling and texting, pleading with me to come home. She even roped in my family, telling them her side of the story. My parents, ever the traditionalists, urged me to go back to her. "She's pregnant, for God's sake," my mom said. "You can't just abandon her." But I couldn't do it. I couldn't pretend everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. I couldn't stay with someone who had betrayed me so deeply, no matter how much I loved her. The worst part was the uncertainty. If the baby was mine, I couldn't just walk away. I'd have a responsibility to that child, even if I wanted nothing to do with Clara. But if the baby wasn't mine, the thought made me sick. I knew I had to take control of the situation, but I wasn't sure how. All I knew was that I couldn't let Clara and her lies dictate the rest of my life. Something had to give. The days that followed were pure chaos. I stayed at Jake's, trying to piece together my shattered thoughts while dodging Clara's incessant calls and messages. She bombarded my phone with tearful voicemails, desperate apologies, and promises that she'd never hurt me again. My parents, who had been sympathetic to me initially, began to shift their stance after Clara spun her sob story to them. "She made a mistake," my mom argued over the phone. But she's carrying your child, Daniel. You can't just abandon her and the baby like this. What kind of father would you be? The guilt was unbearable, and I found myself teetering on the edge of caving in. If the baby was mine, how could I live with myself knowing I'd left them behind? But then there was the glaring reality of Clara's betrayal, the thought of spending my life tied to someone who had destroyed my trust. Clara wasn't letting up either. One day she showed up at Jake's apartment, pleading at the door with swollen eyes and trembling hands. "Danny, please," she begged. "I know I messed up, but I love you. I don't want to do this without you." Jake stood between us, his arms crossed. "You need to leave, Clara," he said firmly. "Just give me 5 minutes," she cried. "Daniel, please. This is your baby we're talking about." I sighed, stepping outside to talk to her. She looked so fragile, her usual confidence replaced by a desperation I hadn't seen before. "I'll take a paternity test once the baby's born," I said. "But we're done, Clara. I can't forgive you for this." Her tears turned to anger. "You're such a coward," she spat. "Running away instead of facing this like an adult. You think you're blameless? You were so busy with work, so caught up in your own head, you barely noticed me falling apart." "That doesn't justify cheating," I snapped. "I was planning our future, Clara. I was going to propose, and the whole time, you were sneaking around with Elliot." Her anger crumbled, and she slumped against the wall. "I'll do anything," she whispered. "Just don't leave me." I stared at her, the woman I once thought I'd spend my life with, and felt nothing but emptiness. "Anything?" I asked, the beginnings of a plan forming in my mind. She nodded desperately. "Then terminate the pregnancy," I said. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" "If the baby is mine, I'll be tied to you forever," I said coldly. "I can't do that. If you want any chance of us working this out, you'll end it." Her face crumpled, and she began sobbing uncontrollably. "How can you even ask me to do that?" she choked out. "It's your child." "Maybe it is, maybe it isn't," I said. "But I can't move forward like this, Clara. Not with this hanging over us." The backlash was immediate. Clara called my parents, who were horrified by my ultimatum. My mom called me a monster, screaming that I was killing her future grandchild. Clara's friends flooded my social media with hateful messages, calling me every name under the sun. But Clara agreed. A week later, she went through with the termination. I didn't go with her. I couldn't bring myself to face it. She called me afterward, her voice hollow and broken. "It's done," she said. "Now can we fix this?" "No," I said flatly. She let out a sob. "But you said—" "I said it was the only way I'd even consider it," I cut her off. "But I can't forgive you, Clara. We're over." The phone call ended with her screaming abuses at me, and I turned off my phone. The days that followed were a blur of anger and backlash. Clara told everyone what I'd done, painting me as a heartless villain who had forced her to terminate our baby. Even some of my friends turned against me, saying I'd gone too far. "You didn't have to do that," Jake said one night. "You could have just walked away." "She would have roped me in forever," I said bitterly. "If the baby was mine, I'd be paying child support for 18 years. If it wasn't, she'd still have a hold over me. I had to end it completely." Not everyone saw it that way. My mom refused to speak to me, and my dad was barely holding back his disappointment. "I don't agree with what you did," he said one night. "But I understand why you did it. Your mom, she'll come around eventually." But I didn't want to wait for eventually. I packed my bags and left for a 2-week vacation, cutting off everyone except Jake and my dad. I needed space to clear my head, to figure out how I was going to move forward. On the last night of my trip, I sat alone on a quiet beach, the sound of the waves calming my restless mind. I thought about everything that had happened, the choices I'd made, and the fallout that followed. I'd lost Clara. I'd lost my child, if it was even mine. I'd lost friends and family who couldn't understand my decision. But I'd also reclaimed my freedom. As I stared at the horizon, I couldn't help but wonder, did I do the right thing? Was I justified in ending things the way I did? Or was I just as monstrous as everyone said? I guess I'll never know.